Game design is like any other creative endeavor. You have to learn how to do it. You're not going to be an expert to start with. So, what are the best ways to learn? Here's the problem. Assuming you're interested in making video games, then you're confronted with the big problem that making software is serious, time-consuming business. A lot of it is programming, a lot of it is art, a lot of other things. But both programmers and artists often attend universities to get degrees to learn how to program or to be good at art. It's not something that's really simple. So if you don't already have those skills, you face a very, very, very difficult and steep learning curve if you're going to make the software for a game. And of course, video games are often complex software, especially the bigger ones. Recognize that even when you have a team of experts, a AAA video game like comes out for a console takes literally hundreds of man-years of effort to create. And that's by experts, not by you, the aspiring game designer. So if you begin by making software games, you're going to spend all your time figuring out how to make the software, and game design is going to get forgotten and lost. So what's the solution? This is a solution used at many universities, especially where the instructors in game design are actual game designers and not somebody who's been drafted to teach it, although they don't have a clue about it. And that is, use tabletop games to start with. You don't require any unusual skills to make a tabletop game. You can hand draw stuff if necessary, but often it's done on computer, and most people have some rudimentary computer skills. It also lets you focus on the game design. You're not worrying about the software, you're worrying about how the game plays and how the game affects the people who are your target audience. So we start with the tabletop. And this is a summary of things, and I'm going to go through each one. Prototyping is faster and more efficient. I can conceive a game and make a prototype in an hour if it's a tabletop game. I could never do that with a video game. Fail fast is a motto that's quite common in the game industry. And what that means is we want to try our ideas out and see how they work in practice. And then if they don't work, we failed and we get rid of them and we can go on to the next thing. And that's one reason why video game developers make paper versions of games before they make the software, because they can fail fast, and because they can do it a lot faster, it's a lot more efficient. The iterative nature of game design becomes clearly evident when you have tabletop prototypes. You can see, oh, this isn't working, so I'm going to change this. And then you can try it out. And if that doesn't work, well, I'll try something different. It's much more obvious in a tabletop game than in software, partly because it can be done so quickly, but partly because making software is something that mostly goes on in people's minds, and there's no tangible physical component, and so it's harder to see that things are happening. Now, until recently, software didn't change much during development, and that was one of the big problems with software and why so many big software projects, games or otherwise, failed. Because there was a plan made, and then the software was made according to the plan, and near the end of the time available, they actually had some software to try and found out, oh, this doesn't work at all like what we thought it would. Game developers have now figured that out, and they use systems like Agile, where the objective is to produce a playable prototype in as short a time as possible, and then work with that with typical users and improve the software iteratively, that is, again and again and again and again, over and over, until you arrive at something that's satisfactory. Another advantage of tabletop games is that graphics and other visual effects are absent, or mostly absent, and they cannot obscure the game design. Games are good because they play well, not because they look good. Yes, there are people who are strongly influenced by graphics. Nonetheless, a game that looks good and plays poorly is not going to last very long. If you want people to keep playing your game, and consequently to tell other people that your game is worthwhile, then graphics and such are secondary. It's how the game plays that matters. I have seen, even in tabletop games, inexperienced designers spend far too much time on the appearance of a game. In fact, it's not so true nowadays as it was 5 years ago, but 5 years ago, if I saw a tabletop game prototype that looked really good, I strongly suspected that the designer had spent far too much time on the graphics and not enough time on the game, and it was probably going to be a poor game. And I was usually right. You are going to change your game many, many times. If you get hung up about how it looks, if you spend a lot of time making it pretty, then you'll be reluctant to change it. And that's the kiss of death. You have to be willing to change the game. So don't do something that makes you less willing. So your job as a game designer is to design something that the people in your target market enjoy playing, not something they enjoy looking at. If they enjoy playing it when it's plain vanilla, they'll enjoy it even more if a good artist makes it look good. Let the artists worry about making it look good. With tabletop prototypes, more possibilities can be generated and tested because it's much easier to change a tabletop prototype than it is to change a software prototype. Software prototypes require time and knowledge to make any changes. In fact, when you're making a prototype, you don't even have to know everything about the game to make the prototype, because the first time it's played, you as the designer can decide how something's going to work when you run into something you haven't figured out yet. You can't do that with a prototype for a video game. You've got to figure out everything so it can be put into the software. Otherwise, you get to a point in the software, playing the game, that you can't do anything, and that kills the playtest. So, in a tabletop game, gameplay becomes the focal point of creation. You don't have the fancy graphics and installation programs and so forth for a tabletop. You've just got the prototype. You don't have to have music. You don't have to have slick art. You just have the game and how the game plays, and that's what counts the most. Finally, with tabletop games, computers can never be the scapegoats. Beginning designers, especially of video games, have a habit of doing what I call hiding behind a computer. But this happens to experienced people as well. And that is saying, oh, well, I'm not sure how this is going to work, but the computer will take care of it. Well, sometimes that's true, but sometimes it means that it's a design problem which the computer cannot possibly take care of, and you've ignored that design problem, and by the time you figure out that it's a design problem, it may be too late to solve it.